One thing I've seen from people who are upset about the Ten Commandments law in the state of Louisiana is the idea of what's called malicious compliance. This is where you follow the letter of the law, but you do so it's maliciously in a negative way. So maybe you get the Ten Commandments version you're supposed to, but you post it backwards. Or maybe you use it as a dartboard. I've heard that suggestion. And these are all suggestions by people who don't like the law, but who live outside the state of Louisiana. As someone who doesn't like the law and lives within the state and who is a public school teacher, I would never be malicious to someone else's religious documents. Now, I'm Jewish, but I don't look at a Christian version of the Ten Commandments as mine. I don't look at it and say, it's from the Torah. But say it was a chapter of the Gospel. Say I was required to post a chapter of the Gospels, or the phrase, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except by me. That's posted on church signs all over the area. And what if I had to post that in my classroom? I would never be malicious with it, because that would be disrespectful to the beliefs of probably half of my students that I've taught. In some areas, it'd probably be closer to 2/3 of the students who are in those classrooms. And I just would never be malicious. That defeats the whole purpose. If you're a teacher who is worth their salt, you love your students. And to respond maliciously in any way to someone's religious beliefs, let alone a belief that's probably shared by a slight majority of public school students and their families. And I do think you have to really emphasize people who go to public school versus people who send their kids to private Christian schools, many of which are not the best academically involved. People think of private school as this elite thing. In the South, particularly in the last 10 years, lots of private schools have opened that are more about a religious environment than academics. And I support people's rights to send their kids there. We have a Mennonite community not too far from here that stops education at 8th grade. I support their right to do that. But in the public school, I would say it's not quite as conservative as people imagine. But say half to 2/3 of the students regard Christianity very favorably, very, very favorably. I would never be malicious to something that they hold sacred and dear. And that's why this puts me in such an odd spot and predicament, because I'm not quite sure how to respond. I don't want to do something where people are like, what if you do this? What if you do that? They want me to come up with some way to skirt around it versus me just saying, I don't want to do it. I don't want to be malicious to it. I don't want to rip it up. I don't want to make it into a dartboard. I don't want to ridicule the religious beliefs. That's the thing. These are sacredly held beliefs by many people, and I don't wish to ridicule it in any way. And being put in this position where it's like it's going to be imposed upon me and imposed upon my classroom. And again, I probably am a little more uppity about this in the fact that my students usually perform at a rate much higher than the state average. And I push my students. And I never teach anyone, I've never taught a student from my faith background ever. I've never taught a Jewish student. I've taught Muslim students, atheist students, pagan students, and of course, very religious Christian students. But I don't, the idea of being malicious with anyone's religious beliefs, that's a non-starter. And so the idea of malicious compliance, that also doesn't work, because I love my Christian students. Same way as I love my Muslim students and my atheist students and my pagan students who are into like Norse mythology or the Wiccan tradition. I love them all. And I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable in my classroom. And just because the assholes who are doing this are pushing a version of Christianity, I would never want to be disrespectful to my students' Christian beliefs. Just as I don't want to be disrespectful to their family's political beliefs. I've never, that I can think of, I've never made fun of Trump or Joe Biden. And those have been the people in office most of my time as a teacher. Obama as well, second term Obama. I've never put those leaders down as an authority person in my students' lives, because I know my students come from diverse families that vote differently. Yes, if I was from another part of the state, maybe it would be overwhelmingly one person more than the other, but in my experience, it's always been mixed. And so just as I've never be disrespectful to Trump as a teacher, because my students, many of them, their families voted for him. I was never disrespectful to Biden. Many of my students' families voted for him. And I don't know who's going to be president this next time, but whoever it is, many of my students' families will vote for that person, and many of my students' families will not. Politics, religion, who thought this was a good idea to bring into the classroom? Obviously someone who has never taught in a public school.